Dumeri Vaughan Kemeri, the co-founder and managing director at Alluvial Agriculture, is live to us from our Abuja studios to discuss this initiative targeting 100,000 smallholder farmers in Nigeria's Niger Delta, Nigeria's oil-rich region where that money comes from. But we're discussing agriculture and technology and how to run some initiatives as game changer for agriculture in Africa. So let's continue this conversation, Vaughan. Thank you very much for sticking by. Let's widen this to the African continent. What do you think the key issues are for smallholder farmers across the continent? How do you think Nigeria, what is in the Niger Delta, is a mirror of the rest of the continent?
Thank you very much for this very interesting question, because it actually addresses also the issue of land holding. When we talk about commercial agriculture, a lot of people believe that only large companies can produce at a large scale. But first of all, that is not true, because like I mentioned earlier, the smallholders are actually responsible for producing about 80 to 90% of the food that we produce locally. So the key to food security actually lies with empowering the smallholders, not the very large-scale commercial farmers. The challenges that smallholders have been facing include access to land. So in our experience, there is really no free land in this country or anywhere in Africa for that matter. Every land that you are looking at belongs to communities and families. And what we really ought to do is to support these communities and families to make their lands productive, rather than taking away the land from them and handing over to large production companies. So one of the things we hope that this will be able to address, our initiative will be able to address, is the issue of empowering smallholders, allowing them to stay on their land and use their land. And where the large companies can come in now will be in the area of processing. Smallholders also have a problem of access to market. They produce, but they are not able to sell their products at good prices, which makes it difficult for them to come back again the following year to farm. So what we are doing is not only catalyzing the provision of tractors and other inputs, but making sure that we provide access to the market at reasonable cost. This is something that we are also working closely together with the International Center for Tropical Agriculture based in Nairobi, so that we can come up with a model that other people across the continent will use to empower and support smallholders, because we are all very passionate about supporting the smallholders.
If you look at the African continent and you find the smallholder farmers, as you've said, producing on that subsistence, whatever level, day after day, year after year, decades after decades, and the big companies are there. Some of them, perhaps in Nigeria, in brewing sector, some of them want to have their own farm, as it were, to produce, whether it's wheat, millet, sorghum, or whatever it is. So the smallholder farmers begin to get afraid that when the big boys with the big deep pockets, like Dangote Group, for example, or flour mills, come into business, they're going to take them off the radar. Do you think this is one solution? This is one thing that will help segment the entire agriculture value chain, keep some folks in the first line of production, and let the big boys take care of processing, invest in rice mill, the mills, the processing, the storage, whatever it is, and resolve some of the perennial problem we have at the bottom of the pyramid, where the common man have the right to land, to farming, with the kind of technology that makes life easy for him.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting. In our interaction with to do primary agriculture, because it's so difficult, the likes of Dangote, flour mills, Olam, they really don't want to do crop production. But over the years, they have found that it was cheaper to import the feedstock from outside Nigeria than to buy from Nigeria, just because of the manner in which the logistic challenges posed by gathering the produce from thousands and thousands of farmers. So they decided to go into backward integration so they can guarantee feedstock for their processing units. So what these big multinationals are doing is actually a response to the challenges that the smallholders are having in producing and aggregating these commodities at reasonable scale for processors. So what we are doing will actually require the support and cooperation of these processors. We need to work together with the processors to guarantee a market to the smallholders, and also to guarantee to the processors a reliable supply of these commodities. And our initiative, because it's in community blocks, in other words, we are not talking about dealing with hundreds of thousands of farmers in hundreds of thousands of different locations. We're talking about aggregating the farmers in locations where up to between 200 and 500 hectares are together, and the farmers are working collectively in these large farms. So this has some of the characteristics of commercial farms, in that the farm is contiguous, but it has the characteristics of smallholder farms as well, because the same large farm is divided up amongst the small holders. So we will have the advantage of having large quantities of produce to supply to the processing companies. And once the processing companies understand that they have security of supplies, then they will not need to go back in to produce by themselves. It's just like in football, where the striker is far away from the ball and the defense and midfielders are not able to